Wonderful. Jim, your career path is so inspirational. From your humble beginnings to making your first million to where you are now. Can you share some of your story with our listeners?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think back on my story quite often because it kind of amazes me that coming from where I came from and doing what I was doing growing up, that I ended up where I am today. But, I started off with my first job picking cotton at age 6. That was my first job. And probably today my parents might be arrested for child labor or something, but we had to do it to have food on the table and clothes on our back. So the whole family picked cotton during the fall. And, I learned from that, though. I learned a lot. I think the main thing I learned is that hard work in itself, like physical hard work, unless you just absolutely love it, is not going to take you anywhere financially because you can only do so much with your own two hands. But it was backbreaking work, and I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. But I did learn a work ethic, and I always would strive to, every day I would strive to beat my last day as far as how much cotton I had picked that day. And it might be a pound more, and a pound of cotton. I mean, you got to have a lot of cotton to weigh a pound. It's not very heavy. So anyway, I went from there, and then I mowed lawns and things during high school or junior high to make a few bucks here and there. And then my first real job that I had an employer was working in a gas station pumping gas. And I did that for about 2 years. I got married. I dropped out of high school for one thing midway through my 10th grade. I got married at 18, had my first child at 19. And I had a job at the gas station working 60 hours a week, 10 hours a day, and I got paid $1 an hour. So I took home, never forget, $52.10 a week. And my employer would always pay me in cash, $52 and that dime. And so I didn't know what I'd be there the rest of my life because I didn't have any experience or business background or money or, any education or anything like that. So, but my dream job actually was working in the factory on the assembly line down the road, but you needed a high school diploma to get in. And I'll never forget the day that a fellow came in, had been in quite a few times, but that day we got into a conversation, found out that he was a supervisor at the factory. He invited me to go to work there. And I told him I didn't have a high school diploma. And he said, well, you passed this test when you come in, and I'll make sure that you get the job, which he did. So here I landed my dream job, and I was making $1.67 an hour, but I only got to work 40 hours a week. So I still took home about $52 a week, something like that. So it was probably 3 or 4 years into that job that my life took a turning point. It was a life-changing experience for me. I was working the swing shift. I got off at 12:30 a.m. and about midnight, I only had a half hour to go, and my next night was my night off. And this fellow walks up to me, and I'd met him a couple of times, didn't know much about him, but he said, "Hey, Britt," he said, "you going to work in this factory the rest of your life?" And I'm going, "I don't know, maybe. I don't know." He said, "Come go to this meeting with me tomorrow night." He said, "I think it's something we could do to make some extra money." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "They just told me to bring somebody with me." And I said, "Well, I'm not your guy. So I'm not taking my night off to go to some meeting. I don't even know what it's about." He said, "Come on, man." He said, "He told me to bring somebody." He said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. If you go with me, I'll buy the beer afterwards." I said, "What time's the meeting?" So I went to the meeting for the beer afterwards. And so I sat through the meeting, though, and about halfway through it, it was like the lights went on in my head. I'm going, I can do this. And not only can I do it, I can get rich doing it. And I didn't know what rich was, but I had this vision of a lot of money. And so long story short, I got started in that direct sales company. And the only training I had was your job is talking to people. He said, if you talk a little, you'll learn a little. If you talk a lot, you'll learn a lot. That was my training. So I set out to start talking to people, and I asked him how many a lot was, and he said 10 a day. And I said, okay, I'll do 10 a day. So we didn't have internet or social media or anything like that. So I had to go actually make connection with 10 people every day, which I did for a year. And at the end of the year, I had talked to more than 3,650 people. All of them told me no. And at that point,
Wow.
Another turning point in my life, which really was major for me. So I'm standing in my kitchen. I'll never forget it. I'm standing in my kitchen, looking out the window, wondering, what am I going to do? I got a wife and a child. I looked to the left out the window where my cars used to be parked. They had both been repoed. I looked to the right, I could see the front door, and there was a notice on the door that says, from the sheriff, says you have to be out in 5 days by order of the sheriff, because my home had been foreclosed. And so I had reached in my pocket and I had 15 cents. That was it. So I had 15 cents, a wife and a child, and didn't know where to go. And I can tell you in the next 5 days, it was like a series of miracles took place. I had a place to live, a 3-bedroom furnished apartment. I had a car to drive. I had money coming in every week. And somebody knocked on my door from the company, spent 2 hours with me and taught me what I was doing wrong, what I needed to be doing to get my business up and running. And my business took off like a rocket. So from 15 cents in my pocket to 1 year later, I'd made my first $1 million. So that's how I got started.
So you just had some education and a tweak with, you needed education.
I guess I did. I don't know what I needed, but it's like people today say, how do you handle rejection? I'm going, well, I did all of that when I was 22 years old. I don't need to do that again. I did it 3,650 times in 1 year. So when you get through that, it doesn't bother you anymore.
Right. Right. So how can people raise the bar on themselves? So many people's expectations are so low in terms of what they can achieve. What are some things people can do to open up that vision of what they can do?
Well, I think first of all, you have to be, I think the first step is you have to have a desire to change. And people, when you think about changing and doing something more, like what I did, start a business on the side and work 12, 14 hours a day or whatever. When you start thinking about doing something maybe a little uncomfortable for you, like when I went out and started talking to people, well, I only knew about 10 people in the factory where I worked, and there were 9,000 people there, but I only knew about maybe 10 or 15. And maybe a couple of neighbors, and that was about it. So it was very uncomfortable for me. So we're always weighing out the pain of staying where we are versus the pain of changing. So you desire to have more, but are you willing to endure the pain to make that change? And that's where a lot of people, they weigh it out and they go, well, just give me a beer and point me toward the television, give me the remote, the bag of chips, and I'll be okay. That's way more comfortable than, giving up all of that and getting on the phone and making calls or whatever you have to do to whatever business type you're in. So desire is important, but it's not enough. Desire won't really take you anywhere. It'll lead you to the next step, actually. But if let's just take money, for example. The average person, the average working person spends probably 80% of their waking hours going after money in some way, whether it's a business, a job, commuting to work, whatever. About 80% of their time is spent going after money. But the reality is 90% of the population doesn't have enough. They live paycheck to paycheck because they've been programmed to live paycheck to paycheck. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you like. But a lot of people want to break out of that, but they don't know how because their programming stops them. So you could go out on the corner of the busiest city in the nation or the world and ask 1,000 people if they'd like to make more money, if that was a desire of theirs, and you'd get 1,000 yeses. Even on Wall Street or some financial district, you'd still get people, they're making $1 million a year, they want to make $2 million a year. So everybody's looking to make more money. But how many actually do? 90% don't. So it's the next step that's critical. And this applies to anything you want to accomplish, whether it's making money, starting a business, getting a degree, losing weight, getting healthy, working out, anything that you want to accomplish in your life. It's based on a decision that you make. And that decision has to be so firm that nothing less than that will do. See, I didn't know that night that I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get rich doing it. And I just never lost that determination, that decision, that commitment. And what happens though, if you take a decision, and let's say that this full circle here is a decision.
Right.
The problem is that most people make that decision with just a little opening someplace. That's their escape route. That's their excuse as to why it didn't work. Well, I tried it, but you can't make sales calls in the rain. But my opinion is that's the best time to make sales calls because everybody's in. They're not out on the street anywhere. They're not at the beach. So, but you've got to be so firm with it that nothing less than that will do. It's like a woman approached me one time at an event. She says, "Can you help me quit smoking?" I said, "Sure." And I said, "How many times have you tried to quit?" And she said, "Oh, I can't even count all of them." I said, "What all have you tried?" She said, "Oh, I tried the patch, I tried the gum, I tried this and that." I said, "What are you trying right now?" She said, "I'm on the tapering method." I said, "Oh, so you just taper off a little?" She said, "Yeah, I smoke a pack and a half a day, and now I'm down to 1 pack a day." I'm going, "Okay." She said, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "The first thing you have to do is make a decision to be a non-smoker, not to quit, not to taper, not to chew the gum, to be a non-smoker. Because when you make that decision and it's firm, smoking is not an option. It's not if you made the decision to be a non-smoker." Right. So she said, "Okay, I will. I'll make that decision right now." And I said, "100% yes." I said, "Okay." She said, "That's it?" I said, "Yep, that's it." So I watched her about at noon when we took a break for lunch. So everybody was in the lobby of the hotel outside the meeting room, and they were out on the patio having their lunch. And I saw her, I watched her, because a smoker, after they eat, they want to light up a cigarette. So I watched her, and sure enough, she finished eating and she reached in her purse, she took out a cigarette, put it in her mouth and lit it and took a puff. And then she looked at it, threw it on the ground and stepped on it. And she kind of made this awful face. And so she came back in later and I said, "So how's it going?" She said, she told me what she just did. She didn't know that I'd seen it. And she says, "I couldn't stand the taste of it." And she's never lit up another cigarette since.
So just the act of making a decision.
See,
that's
the
powerful.
Problem is we leave the escape route. As long as I don't get under stress, then I won't smoke. Or, as long as I have enough time to eat healthy for lunch, then I won't go to the fast food. Or, decision, say, okay, well, if you want to be healthy, if you don't have time to eat healthy for lunch, just don't eat, which is probably a healthy thing to do anyway sometimes. So and making money the same way. We have these programs about everything that we do. We've been programmed from birth to death. Our parents going, that's a blue sky, and that's a tree, and that's a tricycle, and learn how to say mom and daddy, and how to walk and how to talk and all of those things. And as we grow up, we learn more and more things. you know. And they become second nature to us. We've got hundreds of programs that become second nature. So I think I shared with you last time we talked, but there was a fellow that I started coaching. It's now been about 3 weeks ago for his first session. And I said, so why do you want coaching? He said, well, I've started 9 businesses and all of them have failed. I said, why did they fail? He said, well, each one of them I had a partner, and the partner either, took me for money, or they didn't show up to do their part of the work or their job. And he said, the partners destroyed every one of them. I said, oh. So, well, tell me about your childhood. He said, I don't think I want to do that. And I said, oh, come on, tell me about your childhood. He said, that doesn't have anything to do with my business. And I said, okay. I said, where were you at 4 or 5 years old? And he said, well, quite frankly, I was abandoned at 5 years old. I said, well, do you see any correlation between that and your business? He said, no, not at all. I said, well, how'd you feel when you got abandoned? He said, well, I felt alone, fearful, angry. I had a lot of emotions I was going through, but I felt alone. And I was, I wanted my parents back. And I said, well, now do you see any correlation? He says, no. So, well, you felt alone then and you wanted your parents back. So you started the business and you took on a partner so you wouldn't be alone. And you kept repeating that cycle, and all 9 of them abandoned you. So now do you see any correlation? And he went silent for about 60 seconds. And he said, oh my God. He said, I would never have considered that. Wow. He said, I've already got my money's worth. He said, I don't think I need another session. And so far he hasn't booked one. So maybe he doesn't, I don't know. He paid for a bunch of sessions, but he hasn't booked another one. But, we get programmed and we can't see it ourselves. That's the problem. You need somebody that's going to ask the right question to get you to take a look inside, because looking outside for answers and going to get motivated and things like that, none of that works. That's all temporary patchwork solutions. 1 minute of looking inside for change is worth a lifetime of looking outside. So, and that's where a good coach comes in too, that, somebody that can help to guide you through and ask the right questions and make the right suggestions and things. It's so important. Just like the person that spent 2 hours with me when I'd lost everything and standing in my kitchen, that knock on the door, and that person that came in and spent 2 hours with me and taught me what I was doing wrong and what I needed to be doing. And my business took off like a rocket. And it was just simple stuff. But I was doing it wrong. One guy told me, he said, practice makes perfect. He just kept saying that. Practice makes perfect. And I'm going, well, I'm not making any money. He said, just keep practicing. Well, what I didn't know is I was practicing the wrong thing. I was perfecting the wrong thing. Right. So he changed me and taught me what I needed to be doing, and my business launched the next day. It took off. So it's so important to surround yourself with people that are more successful than you, that can guide you. Very, very important. And I've never seen him since. One time, 2 hours, that was it. So he's busy being successful now. Well, that was when I was 22 years old. And, he showed up like, I call him a savior, an angel, something. I don't know. Why did he knock on my door? He was from the corporate headquarters. Why did he come and see me? I'm not successful. I'm not making any money. But he said, I understand you're a hard worker and you're not making any money. I said, well, you got that right. So he sat with me and taught me what I needed to do. And it was so simple what I was missing. So simple. I'll tell you what it is, because it's really a value, I think, for people, especially people in business, and certainly people in any kind of sales. And I think that we're all in sales in some way. You open your mouth and talk, you're selling your opinion of something.
Yes.
So he said, he asked me to tell him what I was doing. And I told him 10 a day, that type of thing, and how I'd been trained, just talk to people. And he said, well, how do you know if you have a viable prospect? I said, I don't know. I said, I guess if they buy from you. He said, no, how do you know if there's even a possibility of buying from you? I said, I don't know. He said, well, that's obvious. But yeah. I said, well, how do I know? He said, well, you have to arrive at 3 destinations. He said, do they have a pain or a problem? Do they want to solve it? And can you solve it? He said, if they don't have a pain or a problem, you don't have a prospect. If they don't want to solve it, even if they have a pain and a problem, they don't want to solve it, you don't have a prospect. And if you can't solve it, you don't have a prospect. He said, now, how do you know if they have a pain or a problem? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, that's obvious too. He says, what you've been doing, talking to people, is not working. He said, you've been out there flapping your jaws for a year and you've made nothing. He said, you have to ask questions and listen. I said, what kind of questions? He said, it doesn't matter. I said, what do you mean it doesn't matter? I'm confused. He said, you start a conversation. He said, if you go in and let's say you walk into a coffee shop and you sit down at the counter and there's somebody sitting beside you, he said, you start a conversation. Hi, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? What brings you in the coffee shop? I've seen you here before a couple of times, or whatever. Do you live around here? Do you work around here? What do you do? Do you like your job? Are you married? You got family? What do you do for fun or whatever, And he said, and if you ask enough questions, they will share all of their pains and problems with you. And that is so true. He said, but you've got to listen. You've got to take in and really absorb everything they're saying and really, really be interested, not just ask questions for the sake of asking questions while you're thinking about the next one you're going to ask. Listen to them. He said, and here's the thing that really, really made a difference for me too. He says, Jim, he said, I'm going to give you a key here. He said, if you'll live your life this way, he said, you're never going to want for friends, for money, for a network of people. He said, you'll build a network worldwide one day. He said, here's the key. Right. Every time you meet somebody, doesn't matter if they are a stranger in a restaurant or on an airplane or wherever, out on the street someplace, every time you meet somebody, always be asking yourself, what can I do to help this person? Not what can I sell them, not if they're interested in my product or service or anything. What can I do to help this person? And he said, sometimes you'll do things that they may buy something from you eventually, but sometimes you do things just because you can help that person. And he said, so if you always have that philosophy, he said, you'll have all kinds of friends and you'll build a network worldwide. And I've lived my life that way for since then. That was a moment for me because I thought a lot about that. And I still do today. In fact, my wife is always saying, every time we're around people, you're always trying to help them. She said, you always lead the conversation to help somebody. I'm going, well, that's just what I do. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Are there any traits that are innate within us that help us with success?
Well, back to that decision-making process.
Yes.
The decision creates a mindset. We've all heard about mindset, but the mindset determines how you show up to the world. And it also determines how the world shows up to support you. Mm-hmm. So the mindset creates a level of clarity, a level of confidence, and people like confidence. They like clarity. They like to be around people that know where they're going. So when you make a decision, if it's a full encompassed commitment, a full decision, you're putting out a signal to the world of confidence, and you're somebody that knows where you're going. And people love that, and they will support you. If you put out a signal of lack of clarity, you'll get fed things that's going to keep you unclear. You'll be put in situations that's confusing to you. So to me, it's what you resonate with. I saw something on, I think, LinkedIn this morning, and somebody said, the universe is aligning to support you very soon. And I commented back, I said, the universe has aligned to support every person on the planet based upon what they resonate with, what their intention is. Mm-hmm. It'll always support you. Will always. We're in partnerships with whatever you want to call it, the energy that's there to form whatever we want to form. If we want to, if we want to create, a Post-it note, somebody did that and they made a fortune doing it. Somebody created the cell phone and they made a fortune doing it. And it's all the same energy. It's just what comes up here, and we remold it into something different, and so it's what you resonate with. Luckily, Edison created a light bulb.
Certainly did. He had to try a few times to get it right.
Yeah, it's interesting. You go into his little museum at the Hotel Del Coronado on Coronado Island down near San Diego.
San Diego.
He's got the whole little museum down in the basement of his light bulbs and things that he created that didn't work. A lot of them didn't work, but he had that intention to make it work. And of course, we light the world. So, people like that, change the world. And we all have that same ability. We really do. And people say, well, there aren't enough opportunities out there. I'm going, well, okay, take a moment, look around the room you're in, and count the amount of things in that room that somebody became a multimillionaire. And it's probably pretty much everything in the room. I don't care if it's a pen and paper or a desk or a mouse on your computer or a microphone or a telephone or whatever. It's everywhere. They said, well, all that's already been created. Well, something's not been created.
Absolutely.
So that decision-making process, and, it just gives you the confidence. I know that when I started speaking, I didn't have a lot of confidence. In fact, I was scared to death. I'd pace the floor for probably 24 hours before I'd get up to speak. And certainly right before I would get up, I'd be, had this gut feeling like I was needed to go outside and throw up or something. I was scared.
I can relate.
But a lot of that comes from, if you can, do you think that you have some of the DNA from your parents in you?
Of course.
So you must have some from your grandparents too, right?
Of course.
And your great-grandparents.
Of course.
And it keeps going back and back back until we all lived in a cave someplace.
Once upon a time.
And our dominant thought process at that point was, how do I kill something to eat? And how do I keep from being killed and eaten? I would guess. I wasn't there, or maybe I was, I don't know. But that's the two dominant things that I would think back in the prehistoric days when there were, saber-toothed tigers around the corner and things like that, that you had those two dominant thought processes. How do I kill something to eat? How do I keep from being killed and eaten? So when I stepped on the stage for the first time, I had a fear of being killed and eaten. Not literally, but the same type of thing. I'm thinking this audience is going to kill me, and I got to say the right thing. I got to make sure that, but I'll never forget the night. I'd already spoken in front of probably 400,000 people when I finally lost my fear. And
wow.
Remember the night I was in Park City, Utah, and the night before, I think I always thought that I was always afraid that somebody might ask me a question I couldn't answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to me that night how nobody could ask me a question I couldn't answer regarding my training. I mean, there's a lot of questions I can't answer. You know, I don't know how a cell phone works, but I'd simply say I don't know. But what I was sharing with people, I think I had just a little bit of lack of confidence. But that night I discovered something, and the next morning, all of my fear was gone.
What was
I
that?
had 400 people in the room, and I said, let me at them. That was it. I'm going to change some lives today. And I've never had that butterfly feeling since, ever.
What was that you realized?
Well, we have two needs as human beings
Mm-hmm.
that kind of overshadow or control all of our negative feelings, emotions, experiences. And those two needs are the need to be in control and the need for approval. So when you step on a stage, as an example, the two things that you're looking for is an approval from your audience and to be able to control the audience.
Sure.
But here's the problem. If you need approval, you get none. If you need to control, you're out of control. So you've got to be you. And also understanding that if somebody asked me a question, in fact, I've put it out to audiences before. I said, tell me something that's not working in your life that doesn't fall under those two needs. And one woman, she raises her hand and she says, no, I can tell you something right now. I said, okay. She said, I've got a messy office. Okay. I said, why is your office messy? She said, well, I'm really, really busy. I said, okay. I said, are you productive? Are you really, really busy so that it looks like you're really productive, so other people think that you're busy and productive? She goes, I said, which one is that? The need for approval or control? She said, you got me, the need for approval. She said, I'm not very productive, but I do have a messy office. So, you know, I mean, you can look at things like that, and it's just, you know, a woman in one class, this is a more extreme example. She came to the class, a 2-day class. She came in the first day. I happened to see her when she was checking in, and I noticed that she had bruises on both wrists. She had bruises on her neck. She had a black eye, and she had a busted lip, and she had makeup trying to cover it, but you could still see it. And she checked in, and we started the class. And about middle of the afternoon, some people were sharing different things that's happened to them and things that I was helping them to let go of. And she said, I'd like to share. So she said, I've been in 7 abusive relationships, physically abusive. She said, 4 of them I got married, 3 of them I'm living together. I'm living with a guy now. He's physically abusive. And she said, actually, he said this morning when I left, if you ever try to leave me, I will kill you. And he meant it. I said, okay. So I started working with her on her need for approval or control. I first said, tell me a little bit about him. And she said, well, he's very controlling, and, you know, and he gets mad and he beats me up. And I said, and you allow that? Well, he's more controlling and he's bigger than me and he beats me up. And I said, oh, okay. I said, so it sounds like you're a perfect match. I said, why would you say that? He beats me up. I don't like that. I said, well, obviously you do. You're still there. So I said, he's a controller. You need approval. So I said, he needs somebody to beat up so he feels like he's in control. You need somebody to beat you up so you feel like you're getting attention, even though it's abuse. And I said, now let me see if I get this right. He beats you up. A little bit after that, you yell at him and run him out the door. And he goes down and has a few beers or something. And a few hours later, he calls you back and says, honey, I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. Please take me back. She said, how did you know that? I said, well, now you're in control and he's needing approval. I said, and you guys play that game back and forth. She said, well, how do I stop it? I said, it's not about him. It's all about you, 100% you. I said, you have to let go of your need for approval. And I worked with her for about 30 minutes on helping her clear that. And she completely cleared it to where you could see the look on her face. She looked like she'd taken 10 years off of her face.
Wow.
And then before she went home, she said, what do I do when I go home? And I said, don't do anything. Just go home like you normally go home. Just feel the way you're feeling right now. He said, I don't need to say anything, or no, just go home. And she said, okay. So she did. Next morning, she comes back. We just started, and she runs up the front. She said, I got to share. She said, I go home last night, and she says, I walk in the front door, and she said, I was feeling really good. And she said, I thought my boyfriend would be there in the front room having a beer or something, and he's not. And I said, she said, then I thought, well, he's probably in the kitchen getting another beer. Well, he's not. And she said, so I ran into the bedroom where he probably passed out on the bed, but he's not there either. She said, suddenly the whole place felt different. She said, I ran to the closet, opened the doors, and all of his stuff was gone. And he left a note saying, I will never be back. So she said, how could that have happened? I said, do you believe we're energetically connected to people? I mean, you can feel a person's energy right here with you. Well, they can pick that up, miles away. So when he felt that he no longer had somebody to control, he's off looking for a new victim. And now she's married and has been for years, and very successful marriage and relationship and no abuse. So it's all about you making the changes, not somebody else. So
very
anyway.
Profound insights.
that works in all areas of life. I mean, I think if you look at stuff that's not working well and just ask yourself, is this a need for approval or control? And it's always one or the other. It's never not. You're feeling some emotion, sadness, hopelessness. Well, what is that? Is it a need for approval or control? We all kind of vibrate at certain levels. We resonate. Like sure. Hopelessness is a feeling that you're almost at the bottom. Sure. In fact, you are at the bottom, but most people don't stay there, but some do. And to get out of that, it's almost like you've got to be acted upon by an outside force of some kind. But then you got from hopelessness, you go to sadness. And sadness it's a higher level of vibration because you can feel it. Hopelessness, you're kind of locked and no feeling. And sadness is moving a little more. And then you've got fear. And that's even a higher level of vibration. Which doesn't seem like it is, but it is.
Yes.
And then you go from fear to anger, which is a higher level of vibration. Then you go from anger to something more like anxiety, which is a whole mix of a bunch of stuff like fear, anger, and depression. Makes up anxiety, and those are what I would consider the lower levels of vibration. Mm-hmm. But the higher level of vibration, and a lot of people live right in that anxiety level.
They certainly do.
Some bounce back and forth. Some are angry and they get back to anxiety. Some are fearful, back and forth. But the three top levels are courage, acceptance, and peaceful. So if you're courageous enough to let go of those bottom ones, courage is not something you have to make up. It's letting go of those other things, and courage is automatic.
It creates courage.
A natural state. Children have courage. They get programmed otherwise. We all have it. We just get programmed otherwise. So
you're saying it's really important just to identify those feelings, mm-hmm. so you can transcend them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. You look at something that's not working and you attach a feeling to it or an emotion to it. And but if you can also identify it as a need for approval or control, you let go of that, you get rid of a lot of feelings and you may not even know what they are, because you're letting go of the overriding thing that controls all of that. So
right. Now, earlier when we first started talking, you mentioned that you had learned that working hard doesn't equate to making more money. What is your definition of financial success?
I think financial success, money to me, it gives you options as to how you live your life. And, I live my life the way I want to live it. I live where I want to live. I get the home I want. I drive the car I want to drive. I have, I can go and come as I please. And to me, it's freedom. And I think really everybody's looking for freedom, but some get attached to money, and it's, you've heard the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yes, that's a script.
Yeah, but I don't believe that. I
Certainly
think it's
not.
a lust for money, because you only have one other option. You either love it or fear it.
Yes.
And if you can't love money for what it's good for, because it's only paper, it's like looking at a picture of a family member and say, I love this picture. Well, I love Ben Franklin. So it's the same thing. Or I hate Ben Franklin. Well, I'll hear people all the time go, well, money's not important. Well, let me see. I can pretty much guess how much you have. You probably don't have any, or very little, because it's not important. You go into a showroom to look at a new car. Well, you go in there because you see the value of a car, and you figure out how to get it because you see the value that it's going to help you go from point A to point B. I mean, try walking from, Sacramento to San Diego.
That's going to be hard.
500 and some miles. You can drive it in a few hours. So we see a value of a car. That's why we have it. We see a value of putting a roof over our head. We see a value of having a bed to sleep on instead of the floor. We see value in things and we get it. The problem is we don't see value in the money. So if you start to love money for what it will bring to you and the options it'll give you as to how you live your life, because I think we're created to live in abundance, not to live small and live in poverty, or I just don't believe that.
I don't either. Absolutely.
So I'll give you something here that's probably the most important thing I'll share.
Okay, wonderful.
I don't know how much more time we have, but this is short. A friend of mine, we used to buy the same books, like real in-depth spiritual type books, and we would both be reading them, and we'd call one another. Say, what go to page 32 and read that real quick, and let's discuss it. That type of thing. We kind of learn from each other. So we did that for a year or so, but one day we were discussing something, and I don't remember what it was, but before he hung up, he said, what do you think the word resourceful means? I said, I don't know. Maybe being more productive, using your imagination. I said, I don't know, something like that. And I said, why? And he said, no, it's just an interesting word. I said, okay. So we hung up and that was it. So I'm driving a little later, going back to my home, and I couldn't get the word out of my mind. Resourceful. This has been years and years, a lot of years ago. And so before the internet. And so I go home and I pull out the dictionary and I look up the word resourceful. And it's defined as once again full of source. I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Resourceful, once again full of source. I thought, well, depends on what you think source is. That could be pretty powerful. Then I looked up the word source. And the definition was where all things originate. Not some things, but all things. I went, wow, that is powerful. So what is source? Is it the universe? Is it God? Is it, what is it? So I started, I was obsessive for about 1.5 years or so, looking for ways to find other definitions of source. I tried to find the origin of the word, all kinds of stuff. So I was in England, a small town called Chester, and I was walking down the sidewalk. It's kind of a cool little village, and I saw a sign on the back door. It said antique bookstore. I thought, oh, wow, I love old books. And I said, maybe they got some really old ones in there. I don't know. So I go in the back door. The first book I see is a dictionary about this thick, and it's all tattered and torn. I don't know how old it was. I didn't even look at that. I wished I had.
Right.
And it had a little sign on it that says, do not open, do not touch. I'm going, And I thought that probably meant for people in the UK, not for me. So I opened it.
Right.
And I was prepared to buy it if I had to, but I opened it to the S's and I looked up the word source. And it had some of the same stuff I'd seen before, but as I'm scanning down the page, I see a one-word definition. It said source, love. I went, wow. Once again, full of love. And I started thinking about that. Love is where all things originate. Because resourceful is where, source is where all things originate. Well, source is love. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wow, that is really powerful. So if you fall in love with something, in other words, like you fall in love with your business, you fall in love with a project, you fall in love with, I want to get that new car. I've got to figure out a way to do it. So you fall in love with what it is you want to accomplish. Fall in love with the vacation, and then you take it. So that's how we create. When we're inspired, when we have passion, when we're in that space of love, and when we get out of that, that's where confusion takes place. So I thought, wow, that is powerful. So when you make a decision to do something, you're falling in love with it.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you got a little opening, you're falling in love with a little fear mixed in. Then I started thinking about that again. I thought, wait a minute, there's a flaw here. If all things originate in love, where does fear come from? Didn't take me long to figure it out, but I thought, bothered me for a minute or two. And I thought, oh, fear is something we create in our own minds. It's not real. We create fear in love. Love helps us to create anything we want to create. We want to create hardship. We want to create being broke. We fall in love with that.
With the idea.
With the idea of it. And fear is just a made up story. It's proof that we can create as human beings. Somebody said, well, not all fear. And I said, yeah, all fear is made up. And he said, well, what if a bear is chasing you through the woods? I said, still made up. You're making up the story of what's going to happen when he catches you. I said, now that may be more real than, fearing poverty or something, but it's still a made up story. But so my suggestion is fall in love with what it is you want your life to be like. And when you do, you resonate with that, and you create that confidence and that mindset, and you start to, I don't think you attract things like people think you do. You become attractive, but your view of the world changes. You see things you'd never see before. If you don't need to be a millionaire, you'd never see opportunities around you. But as soon as you see the value of becoming a millionaire or a multimillionaire, you'll start to see opportunities around you, and you'll start to work toward that and fall in love with that.
And start grabbing that.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the way I look at life,
You're so passionate, and you've empowered so many people. What's the best compliment somebody's ever given you for your work?
I have 6 sons, and one of my sons the four that my wife and I have two from my first marriage, but I did my wife homeschooled them, and I did a class in entrepreneurship once a week. And my youngest at that time was 11 years old, and he said something about the others were discussing something about, you know, parents and stuff like that. And I turned to him and I said, you know, when you get older, you'll think I'm much smarter. And he said, well, Dad, he said, I already think you're the smartest man that I know. And I never thought that. I just thought all kids are thinking your parents are dumb. You know, they don't know anything. You know,
I love that.
Especially. But I don't know. Other than that, my first book, Rings of Truth, that took. I had to hire somebody to help me write it because I didn't think I could write.
Right.
And it came together magically. I mean, it really did. I talked and she typed, and then we edited together and moved things around. And all. It's a true story, except for one fictional character. So it's about 95% true. And my wife is brutally honest. Mm-hmm. So I said, when the first chapter was written, I said, would you read the chapter and see what you think? She said, no, I'll read the book when it's finished. I'm going, okay. So finally the book is written, but it's not edited. And I said, will you read it and give me your opinion? She said, is it ready to go to print? And I said, no, it's not edited yet. She said, when it's edited and ready to go, completed, and you're satisfied with it, then I'll read it. I'm going, okay, because I wanted somebody's input. I had read the thing 35 times, and every time I find things I want to edit. And finally somebody said, stop reading this thing. And I'd gotten to the point where I didn't even know if it's any good or not. I mean, you read it so much, you just don't know.
You're too close to it.
Too close. So finally I got the manuscript and we're ready to go publish and or find a publisher. And so I bring the book home and I said, okay, it's finished, ready to go. She said, okay. So she sits down, after dinner, she reads like a chapter or two. And I said, so what do you think? She said, I'm not finished yet. And I said, you're not going to tell me your opinion of the first two chapters? No, I'll wait till I finish the book. So I waited and waited. It was days go by, and she'd read some every day. And finally I see she's on the last 2 or 3 pages. So she's finishing it up. So I sat down beside her on the sofa and I just kind of sat there and waited, And
right.
Finally she closed the book. She laid it over on the coffee table and she goes, and I thought, oh no, here it comes. I mean, I thought she was preparing me for this was the worst book I ever read. She goes, wow. She said, that is one incredible book. She said, I think I fell in love with you all over again.
Oh.
So yeah, that was a very moving moment. And
wow,
my wife's
that's
on the
a compliment.
Yeah, and she's on the cover of the book. She said, don't tell anybody. But I was looking for a model to have a picture on the front. I couldn't find anybody I was looking for. And one night we're in bed and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning and the drapes were open and the moon was shining in. Mm-hmm. And it was shining on her face. And I'm looking at her and going, that's my model right there. So I wake her up and I said, you're going to be on the cover of the book. And she said, shut up and go back to sleep. What are you doing? So anyway, I talked her into it and she said, okay, but don't promote, don't tell anybody, I'm going to cover the book. But she is. So I happened to print it inside too.
That's great.
It's a great book. If you read the book, I'll guarantee you will not escape that book.
And I will read that book now that you mentioned it.
It will blow you away. I mean, if you got any issue you're dealing with, it's going to come out in that book, guaranteed. You know, so
I look forward to it.
I used to, when I first started selling it, I would, it's a hardcover. It's also on my website, both hardcover and the PDF. But when I first started selling it, I would give my money back guarantee. If you read this book, buy the book, read it. If you don't think it's the best book or one of the best books you've ever read, I'll double your money back and you keep the book. I never had one refund. So anyway, it's it's a great book.
Jim, thank you so much for your profound insights today. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.